Alrighty, today I'm going to talk about the status of SMF2 development within the MIDI Association. So within our working group, we have completed the MIDI clip file some years ago already, so this is available for download as a specification. And we're currently about 80 to 90% complete with the MIDI project container, which we'll talk about here shortly. For SMF files, we have a conception mapping from SMF1 into SMF2, where we think in terms of the old days type 0 and type 1 SMF files, where type 0 was for all data on one track, and where type 0 was all data on one track, and type 1 allowed for multiple tracks of data. In SMF2, we have the MIDI clip file, which corresponds to the one-track concept, and the MIDI project container, which corresponds to the multi-track concept. But unlike SMF1, SMF2's multi-track concept is far more powerful. In the MIDI clip file, we have it's broken into three major parts. The first 8 bytes is just the header that tells you that it is a SMF2 clip. Then a configuration section, which allows you to do what we used to do in a setup bar for XG and GM type files. And then a sequence data part for all of the note data. So whereas this used to be all one blob in SMF1, this is now separated into 3 distinct parts. The primary purposes for a MIDI clip file are quite direct and simple: music education, karaoke, backing tracks for someone who might be playing keyboard or other instruments, distributing on web pages, and just exchanging with your MIDI friends. There we go, catching up into the MIDI project container. Allows us to collect into one file, one zip container, a variety of media assets. So the clip means MIDI clip files. Notation could be MusicXML or PDF or even just PNG files, etc. Audio and video files of various formats. So whereas SMF1, type 1, multitrack was all MIDI data, the MIDI project container in SMF2 is a way to collect, bundle together multiple media formats. The manifest here is an XML manifest, which enumerates what the assets are within the container and where they live on the tracks. So you can have multiple tracks, and the manifest can tell you where the clips, notation, audio, and video assets occur within the project. The purposes of the MIDI project container go beyond that of the MIDI clip file significantly in allowing for more sophisticated educational implementations, of course, multimedia playback, more sophisticated implementations for karaoke, and then more extensive interchange between projects, people working on different platforms. So you could bring in a multi-track project of not only MIDI, but audio and video assets as well. Authoring guidelines are a concept that we have that allows creators of content to describe what their file is doing and how it's doing it and for what purposes. They will be can be bundled along with the container itself for quick reference by anyone who's consuming the container, or they can be linked externally and viewed that way. So this would be like roughly the equivalence of things we have now, XG specification, GM, etc., that says this is how the data is laid out for our purposes. The project container does not prohibit the inclusion of custom files within the container. They can be explained and referenced by the authoring guideline. And of course, a reading implementation can choose how to handle unknown incoming file types. It can simply ignore unknown types. I will now play a video, one hopes, of my colleague at Steinberg, Paul Walmsley, who has been developing an open source library for reading and writing SMF2 MIDI clip files and the upcoming project container format. So I will switch over to that video.
Hi, I'm Paul Walmsley from Steinberg, and I want to talk to you about the SMF2 IO library, which is a library for reading and writing clips and containers in the standard MIDI file 2 specification. Now, I've spent a large part of the last 25 years reading and writing MIDI files, and so I wanted to be involved in the next generation of MIDI files, so I've been involved in the standardization process, coming up with the spec, but I also wanted to create a library that I hope will become a standard way of reading and writing these, which will increase adoption across the industry. So, by having a central standardized library that the whole industry hopefully can align around, effectively I would like this to become the libcurl of SMF2. Because if you have a standard centralized library, then it really will, I hope, increase the rates of adoption across the industry. And particularly if it's easy to integrate into new or existing applications, then it's going to reduce the barrier to entry and hopefully get MIDI 2 files into the hands of users more quickly. And if we have a standardized library, that also means that the whole community can benefit from bug fixes and future extensions. So the library itself, the goal is that it's small, easy to compile, modular and flexible. So there's multiple APIs that allow you to adapt it to the architecture in your host application in a similar way to the way that XML libraries tend to have a sax mode and a DOM mode. You can have a low-level event-driven implementation, or you can read the whole thing to memory and then just iterate across the structure. And so there's similar things in this library. And there's also multiple options as well for how much or how little of MIDI 2 you want to support. So if you only really care about notes and controllers, you can do that. If you don't want to handle the higher resolution MIDI aspects, those can be downsampled effectively into MIDI 1 event. A strange goal really of this library is that it should reduce the need for many people to ever need to read the spec. So the library embodies the spec and will deal with the low levels of file handling, writing the manifest, dealing with the zip files. And so really it leaves you to worry about the more interesting bit, which is what you do with the MIDI, how to get the tracks out, how to iterate them, that sort of thing. So the library itself, the idea is that it's small, lightweight, easy to compile, portable, and written in expressive modern C++, but not too modern. So I've opted for C++ 17 as a sweet spot, really, because that gives you some of the more modern language features and gives you maximum expressiveness. And it also leaves options open to create bindings for other languages. It's built with CMake, which has become standard for building many projects now. It uses UTF-8 everywhere conventions to simplify Unicode handling, and I think most of the text handling inside MIDI 2 itself is also UTF-8. There are minimal dependencies. There's only a few small dependencies required in order to read the XML and zip files. But there's the possibility of implementing different backends if you need them. And it also comes with some sample applications, including an SMF1 to 2 converter to go both ways, and utilities for being able to dump the contents of MIDI text files, which as a developer I've used many times, that sort of thing over the years to diagnose problems. So as a host application developer, you've got several options in terms of how you use the library, because there are multiple levels of API that provide low-level and high-level access to the library. So the simplest option is to do an inline conversion to SMF1. So effectively, you embed the SMF1 converter inside your application, and so it allows you to read an SMF2 file, but internally it gets downsampled into SMF1. So obviously there is some amount of data loss here, but there are options for how you handle high-resolution data, how they get mapped down, and ultimately, if you're only really interested in notes and controllers, then this will get you most of the way there, and then you can very easily say, yep, we support MIDI 2 files. So this is a really nice way, I think, of starting to increase support for SMF2 files. Now, going the other way, to write an SMF2 file, if you already have the code to generate an SMF1 file, then you go the opposite way, and then you effectively upsample an SMF1 into an SMF2. And there's no data loss there really, because SMF2 is a superset of SMF1. There is also a hybrid option as well, where you can do this inline conversion, but you also have access to all the project level metadata. So if you want to do smarter things with the naming of your tracks, or how you handle the clips on the timeline, then you've got the option to do that as well. The second option is if you already have your own MIDI 2 code, so you've got all your own UMP classes, then you can write a layer to convert the internal types of the SMF2 IO library onto your own types, and then just embed the parser on writer layers. So again, the whole file management aspect has been abstracted for you, and then you're able to obtain these events directly inside your own application. The third option is the most flexible one, which is to use the DOM model. And so with this, you're loading the SMF2 file into memory, and then you are able to iterate through the whole project through the track structure and extract the content to convert into your own format. And then going the other way, you build up the DOM model on disk, and then use the library to write it out into a file. So the current state of the project, things are still very much work in progress. There's been quite a few recent changes because in the spec we've made some quite large changes recently to how the manifest is presented. And so I'm trying to keep up to date with that. So the repository isn't public yet, but I'm more than happy to let anyone have sort of access to it if you want to have a look, see how it works. But the actual interfaces and low-level data types are still changing quite a bit at the minute. That's why it's not public as of the moment. And if you're interested in following the progress, then have a look at the discussion forum on the MIDI boards for it. If anyone's interested in thinking about how to support it in your application, then please do get in touch. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Other way. All right. Let me get this sorted. So for anyone who is interested in participating or following along in Paul's work, I will try to put up his contact information for you. So please feel free to reach out directly to Paul, and he will add you to this GitHub repo, which is not currently public facing, so it needs to be requested directly. So please feel free to do so and participate in the project. He'd be happy to have interested parties join along. Where am I? Yep. Okay. All right. For today, that's it for my basic presentation. If anyone else wants to join in on the development of the specifications themselves, you can send an email to developer@midiassociation.org. Yep. And we'll get you routed into the correct group. Or if you have some feedback or further questions, you can direct them there and we will respond to you accordingly. If there's any questions I might be able to answer about the work that we've been doing on SMF2, I will endeavor to do so now. Okay, I think we're good for today. Thank you very much.